Disco time.
Organization called Penguins of Antarctica. In this tutorial page, I'm going to head over to the adding a route section, and doing everything for you like I'm carrying you in a competitive game of Yes Go. But penguins only have 2 genders the last time I checked, because nowadays you never know. Hello YouTube. It's my pleasure to bring to you this exciting video compilation of a 5-part short series that I uploaded here on YouTube on how you can build a React and Tailwind CSS project with routing from scratch. This video will cover everything in that series in one go so you can watch everything in one nice place. How sweet of me, right? If you get stuck at any point of the video, then please check out the links below in the description. To not miss out on any future uploads, consider subscribing to the channel so you can be up to date on the next video series from me and not be late to the party. Feel free to share any suggestions of any web frameworks or libraries related to JavaScript and Node you would like for me to cover in the future. Treat this video as more like a reference instead of a tutorial, so feel free to take notes if you want to or not. Besides that, enjoy the video. Before we get a crack on, make sure you are familiar with the basic fundamentals of React and that you can confidently style a site using CSS. With that said, let's head over to the terminal. Lucky for us, setting up a React.js project is pretty straightforward nowadays. All we have to do is run this following command and let Vite handle the rest of our setup. If you prefer to use a different package manager, then make sure to run the appropriate command for that instead of mine. Whilst this is all getting set up for us, I'm going to show you guys a quick demo of the fun project which we'll be building. The project we will be building is a website for a fake non-profit organization called Penguins of Antarctica. Right now you are seeing the landing page for this site. Over here is a hamburger menu which when you click on, as you can guess, displays a modal for links to other pages in the site for quick navigation. Tailwind CSS makes it easy as well for us to create responsive sites. This site for instance can be viewed on devices with screens no wider than 1280 pixels, so basically anything that isn't wider than a desktop monitor, which isn't an issue for us. I don't want to spoil too much for this project, so we'll head back to our terminal because our setup should be finished by now, which it is. I want to give a quick overview of the project that has been set up so that you are at least familiar with what has been generated. Inside of our project, we find that there is an index.html file which runs a script called main.tsx that renders an app component and imports styles from the index.css file which is used by the component globally for consistent styling. There will some extra setup which we'll need to do in order for routing between pages. But for the meantime, to get you guys playing around with Tailwind CSS, we'll just set that up and work on the landing page right away. Now that our code base is cleaned up a little, let's set up Tailwind CSS. There are only 2 commands we need to run which will enable us to use Tailwind CSS in our project. In my directory, you may have noticed a new file called tailwind.config.js which just got added right now. This file is really important for configuring Tailwind CSS, such as extending or overriding our theme, as well as for adding useful plugins which we can use to extend Tailwind itself. To make it clear to Tailwind CSS which files we want to target, we specify here in the content property an array of rejects to the path of our files. Finally, we head to our index.css file we saw earlier that is now empty because all we will be needing for now are these 3 lines.
Okay.
To test that our Tailwind CSS has been set up correctly, I've replaced the content of our app component with an element that uses Tailwind classes. So if we open up our terminal again and run a development server, we should see our text once our website has been loaded up. Superb. I think this is an appropriate time for me to remind you to drop a like for the algorithm because you might forget to since we are now heading over to the fun part of the project, coding. I'm going to display my code editor and the website side by side because we will be implementing this website using the mobile-first approach, since that is part of Tailwind's philosophy, and therefore recommended to us to adopt, so we will. Let's get rid of this boilerplate code and add that background image for our landing page of the lovely penguins we saw earlier. To that we need to use the prefix pg followed by what we want to modify. In this case, we would like for the image to be a reference to an image I saved in my public folder called landing bkg. Fantastic. Now we've got to add the headline for this page, which shouldn't be hard. That doesn't look right because I remembered the font looking a little more expressive like a Comic Sans font. To use the font for the website we saw earlier at the start, we just need to head back to our Tailwind CSS config file and update our theme. There were 2 custom fonts which were used in that website. Tailwind CSS by default has its own selected set of font families, so we can just override them and use our own like so. In the meantime, while I'm here, I might as well include the colors we need to use for this project. Let's go back to our headline text and add the styles we wanted. Lovely. With that said, so what we want to do to first is create this component inside of our components folder, because we'll be using this component across the different pages of our site. I hate having to write up the same exact code for declaring a component function. So I use this pretty sweet extension which provides various code snippets for React components which I can summon with just a few keystrokes. Ta-da! I highly recommend it because, at least for me, my brain goes blank for a second when I have to create a new component and I feel like I've forgotten React altogether. Perhaps that's just me.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Okay, I'm going to write up some markup for the nav component which should display a modal with 3 links, where each link redirects the user to either the home, about us, our work pages. Since we don't have routing set up and our about us and our work pages ready, I'll just choose text to represent them for now. According to vite.js, you are able to set up a multi-page website without a particular package, which we are going to have a look at, called React Router DOM really soon. However, it is not ideal to go with this approach if you are looking to build an app, let's say, that needs to fetch data from an API before loading the page, which can be an issue.
Hello guys, it's Jovan, and you know what time it is? Disco time!
Nice. We've got our nav component to display our modal with a backdrop, but we need to find a way to toggle this appropriately. For that, we can use the useState hook from React to keep track of an open state, which we can control whether we want to display our nav menu or not. I'm going to install a package called React Icons, which we can use to import to SVG component to render a hamburger icon for us to use to toggle the nav menu. Also, there's another package I want to install which would make it easy for us to dynamically add class names called CLSX. I'll show this soon when we add the transition for the opacity of the modal.
Disco time!
That's it. We got the desired behavior we wanted for the modal, but we still have one thing left to do, which is to make it responsive. There are 2 ways to deal with this depending on what outcome you are trying to achieve, but in this scenario I'm going to use a custom hook that I've coded earlier, which basically takes in a given object of breakpoints and a breakpoint value, and returns a Boolean value if your window matches your provided breakpoint value. If we use our hook to only match if the window exceeds a small phone screen size, then we render a header component instead of a modal. Now if we adjust our screen accordingly, our nav menu transforms into a header. To wrap up this landing page, I'm going to create a simple footer component and import that to our page. I'm going to need to adjust this markup so our footer and background image are displaying correctly. There we go. Just need to add some responsiveness to this page. And we're done. In this tutorial page, I'm going to head over to the Adding a Route section first, and here it shows us an example of how we are supposed to use the router provider component in our React app to enable the routes we have specified for our router. As we scroll down, it's saying here that this route over here serves as the route layout for the pages of our website. This demo screenshot here shows an example of a route layout component being used to display a sidebar for the pages that inherit this layout. Finally, when we head over to the Nested Routes section, it shows how we can nest our routes under our route which can be seen here. This outlet component is important for rendering the element from our routes, which is really similar to how when we render the children prop in our React components. I will revisit this page once again to cover the section below, but I want us to focus back on the project for now. Let's install the React Router DOM package to use this library. Great. We can now begin to start adding routing to our website. First, let's head over to the main.jsx file and follow the example we saw earlier, which I will just copy and paste here, but replace the element for this route with our app component. If we run npm dev again in our terminal, we should expect everything to be working as before, which would be good news for the most part. And it is. I'm going to now create a route.jsx file like we also saw in the docs, which will be used as a layout component for our pages. I will create this under a folder named routes, where I will also store my other routes very soon. This layout component is going to be really simple, as all I'm going to do is render an and outlet component. I'm going to leave out the footer component we created earlier before, because this layout is only concerned with things outside of the main content of the page. If we head over to the main.jsx file and replace the app component with the route component we just created, it should display only the nav. Shoot! The hamburger menu icon is barely visible, but it's working as expected, so that's great. Now we've got our routes and layout set up. Let's now add the nested routes for the route. Again, I'm going to create another route, but this time I'm going to use the existing app component and refactor it to an element for our /home route, which we'll add shortly along with the rest of our other routes. Okay, that's done. So I'm going to copy some of this markup from this app component and use it in our other route components as basic markup for us to later work with. All we have left to do is let React Router know what paths we want to define for our routes and the elements we want to render. Finally, we just head back to our nav component and replace the links we have with the link component from React Router. On the docs, it shows how we are supposed to use this component, where we use a toProperty to define a relative path to our route. You can check out this link here to find more about how to use this component. No pun intended.
We don't do that here.
When I click on the different nav links, it should redirect me to the different pages like so. Personally, I don't like how the nav menu stays open after we are redirected. So I'll use a Boolean property called reload document, which will enable us to skip client-side routing and let the browser instead handle it. Bonito. You may have noticed how we've had to override the default styles of our headings and paragraph elements via classes. Very soon we'll have to do this again, and at this rate, it just leads to more work for us. The easiest approach to deal with this, which Tailwind CSS recommends, is to use the @layer declarative to target the layer we want to add styles to, so we can add global styles throughout our site. To do that, let's head over to our index.css file and write the CSS needed in order to achieve that. To target our elements, we first use the @layer syntax and target our desired layer, which in this case, is the base. Inside of the body, we can add our normal CSS as usual. However, if we want to utilize Tailwind CSS classes, then we need to use the @apply declarative to enable that usage, or otherwise they won't be applied, so let's add that. Okay, Let's head over to our vitejs.js root component and finish that page. For this page, we'll need to add the text content, which should be fairly straightforward, and some styling to properly lay out our content.
Disco time!
Fantastic. There is also a card which displays some fun facts which we want to add as well, so let's do that by creating a component with some markup to show that. We will need data for displaying different facts, so let's add some data right now, which I have for this.
A few moments later.
That's looking good so far. However, when we click the button to show another fact, we should expect it to display a different one. To do that, we can create a simple pure function which returns a random index given an array length. Cool. Sometimes it may display the same fact, but that's fine with me. Everything is looking good in mobile, but as you can see, we need to now make it responsive for the other screen sizes we support. Earlier on, when I was building the responsive nav component, we were using one method to make it responsive, which involved using our breakpoint hook. There are two ways to deal with this depending on what outcome you are trying to achieve, but in this scenario I'm going to use a custom hook that I've coded earlier, which basically takes in a given object of breakpoints and a breakpoint value, and returns a Boolean value if your window matches your provided breakpoint value. But this time, I think it's more appropriate to use Tailwind's breakpoint syntax instead, because we are not rendering new components at all. Since that is the case, I will give you the opportunity this time to try out responsive styling for this page using the mockup design, which I'll provide as a reference for you, so you may practice what you've learned. If you get stuck at any point, then do check out below for a link to the final source code. This will be the hardest segment of this video for you, because I won't be holding your hand this time and doing everything for you like I'm carrying you in a competitive game of Fortnite or CSGO. Jokes aside, if you seriously been paying attention throughout this video, then this should be a trivial task. If you really need a tip, then there will be one below in an explicit comment for you to see. I believe you can do this, so please pause the video here and come back once you're done. You got this. Well, how did it go? I've updated my page to add responsive styling just like you whilst you were gone, and so your page should look something like this. Even if it doesn't look like a carbon copy of mine, and as long as your one is similar to the mockup design I've provided earlier, then you've done a good job in my books. If however you struggled, then I'm afraid there's no hope for you. Psych! Just joking around. I would advise to check out the link to a Tailwind CSS stock page which I'll add below that should help you understand how the breakpoint syntax works. To be able to use Tailwind CSS effectively and easily, it's necessary that you have a foundation in CSS. I advise everyone of this so late in the series, if you haven't done so already, to ensure you have before moving forward. The very last thing we have remaining to do in this project is to complete the Our Work page. To begin, we will need to head over to our work.jsx file which renders the root component for that page. There is one last thing I want to teach about Tailwind CSS, and that is you can create Tailwind components to be used as styles for HTML elements via CSS classes in order to reuse your Tailwind styles. Most often than not, it's preferred to use template partials or JavaScript components, JSX, like React to do this, because it may not be a good idea to use CSS abstraction since it may bite you on the foot. However, I think it's a good use case here to extract our styles that we used to lay out our pages because we don't expect it to be used a lot and we want those styles to remain the same. Therefore, I'd advise to use Tailwind CSS components sparingly under these two conditions. What I'm going to do now is copy this line over here from our aboutus.jsx file and head over to the index.css file to create our Tailwind CSS component. Like before, we'll use the @layer syntax again, but this time to target the components layer. Simply we just declare a CSS class and paste our Tailwind styles inside the body. I'm not going to use my AI code cleaning tool this time, so I'll just quickly head over to my root files and update the appropriate lines that style the layout. Done. Now we set our focus to complete this page. For this page we'll need a header, so let's create the markup for that. The icons for the social media links can be imported from the React Icons package we installed sometime on the start of this series. That was quick. Left now is to display the three guard components we saw on our demo. We can create a component for this that takes in an image source URL, an array of objects as data, and some leading text to render a card which displays information for each of the lovely, cool penguins. With our component done, we can use it in our root component markup, but we need some extra markup to lay out the card properly. Finally, we'll need some data which I'll just paste here. You'll need these images to display the appropriate penguins for your cards, which will be available in the description below. Correct me if I'm wrong, but penguins only have two genders the last time I checked, because nowadays you never know. Oh wow! It looks like that was the last thing for us to do in this project. Let me just test out the responsiveness of this site via Chrome's developer tools. Everything looks good. Each of the routes in our website we get redirected to displays the correct route component for that route. Doesn't it feel great? Have become familiar with what we learned in this series? I hope so, because now we reach the conclusion of this series. I'll leave some extra resources related to what we've been learning, but also here are some project ideas of different complexities which may be suitable for you to really solidify what you've learned. That leaves me with only one last thing to do, and that is to deploy this site. I'll do this after the end of this video, but I'll share the link below for you all to check out if you would like. I hope you all enjoyed this short series and come back again for my future tutorials. Until next time, take care everyone.